So there are 4 cantos in Book 4. This book is called the Book of Birth and Quest. It tells about how Savitri is born, and then how she sets out on her quest. Her father, when she's grown up, her father sends her out to travel around and find the one who will be her husband. So it's interesting that this book of birth and quest comes after the middle of the poem, actually. First, Sri Aurobindo has told us about her father, about King Asvapati, all his story, and how finally he has reached to the Supreme Divine Mother and prayed to her to send somebody to earth who will help the earth to grow nearer to the divine, who will bring about a big change that is too difficult for us human beings to make by ourselves. We need some great divine being to help us. So the Supreme Mother has promised that she will send an emanation of herself, a part of herself, to be born on earth and help to do the work that King Asvapati is praying for, to deliver earth and human beings from the grip of death and ignorance. So in the first canto of this book 4, that's called The Birth and Childhood of the Flame, Sri Aurobindo shows us the seasons of the year after King Asvapati has come back to earth. And it starts with the summer, and then the rain tide, and then the autumn and the winter, and the early spring, the dew time. And then when spring really arrives, Savitri is born. And he says it's a beautiful time when all nature is at beauty's festival. It's as if the whole of nature is celebrating when this special being comes into our world. And now we are in Canto 2, which is called The Growth of the Flame. Savitri is the flame. She's got that energy and that purity and the light and the warmth. And we are reading on page 364, and Sri Aurobindo is describing how the people around Princess Savitri, as she's growing up, how they are attracted to her. They are attracted, but they can't follow her somehow. She's too high and too great for them to be able to keep up with her. Her will, this is Savitri's will, was puissant on their nature's acts. Her heart's inexhaustible sweetness lured their hearts. A being they loved, whose bounds exceeded theirs. Her measure they could not reach, but bore her touch, answering with the flowers' answer to the sun. They gave themselves to her and asked no more. One greater than themselves, too wide for their ken, their minds could not understand, nor wholly know. Their lives replied to hers, moved at her words. They felt a Godhead, and obeyed a call, answered to her lead, and did her work in the world. Their lives, their natures moved, compelled by hers, as if the truth of their own larger selves put on an aspect of divinity to exalt them to a pitch beyond their earths. They felt a larger future meet their walk. She held their hands. She chose for them their paths. They were moved by her towards great unknown things. Faith drew them, and the joy to feel themselves hers. They lived in her. They saw the world with her eyes. Some turned to her against their nature's bent, divided between wonder and revolt, drawn by her charm and mastered by her will, possessed by her striving to possess, impatient subjects, their tied, longing hearts hugging the bonds close of which they most complained, murmured at a yoke they would have wept to lose, the splendid yoke of her beauty and her love. Others pursued her with life's blind desires, and claiming all of her as their lonely own, hastened to engross her sweetness meant for all. As earth claims light for its lone separate need, demanding her for their sole jealous clasp, they asked from her movements bounded like their own, and to their smallness craved a like response. Or they repined that she surpassed their grip and hoped to bind her close with longing's cords. Or, finding her touch desired too strong to bear, they blamed her for a tyranny they loved, shrank into themselves as from too bright a sun, yet hankered for the splendor they refused. Angrily enamored of her sweet, passionate ray, the weakness of their earth could hardly bear. They longed, but cried out at the touch desired, inapt to meet divinity so close, intolerant of a force they could not house. Some, drawn unwillingly by her divine sway, endured it like a sweet but alien spell. Unable to mount to levels too sublime, they yearned to draw her down to their own earth, or forced to center round her their passionate lives. They hoped to bind to their hearts' human needs her glory and grace that had enslaved their souls. You will read, Dhanalakshmi? Yes.
Her will was puissant under nature's tax. Her heart's inexhaustible sweetness flew to their hearts, a being they loved, whose bounds exceeded theirs. Her measure they could not reach, but bore her touch. Answering with the flowers answer to the sun, they gave themselves to her and asked no more.
So this is about the people who could surrender to the mother. Her will, what she wanted, was puissant, was powerful on their actions. If they knew that mother wanted them to do something, immediately they would do it. Her heart's inexhaustible sweetness, that love, the mother's sweetness of the mother's love, lured, attracted their hearts. And they loved that being Savitri, whose bounds exceeded theirs. Means she was much greater and vaster. They were small beings, as we are all small beings. But she's so much greater. Her bounds, her limits are far beyond their limits. They couldn't reach her measure, but they bore her touch. They felt her touch. And they responded to her. It says that they answered to her touch the way that the flower responds to the sun. Most flowers love the sun. No? They know that all their food comes, all their life comes from the sun. So when the sun is there, they are happy, they respond. So these beings, these people who could surrender to her, they answered with the flower's answer to the sun. They gave themselves to her. They just offered themselves and asked no more. They didn't want anything for themselves. They were just happy to live in her light. They tried to do what she wanted them to do. They enjoyed her presence. No? These are the ones who could surrender. Song, would you read?
One greater than themselves, too wide for their ken. Their minds could not understand, nor wholly know. Their lives replied to hers, moved at her words. They felt a Godhead and obeyed her call, answered to her way, and did her work in the world.
Let's pause there. So this is continuing. Those people who were attracted and surrendered. They felt that she is greater than they are, one greater than themselves, and she's too wide for their ken. Our ken is what we can know, what we can grasp. They felt they can never understand her. She's so much greater than they are. Their minds could not understand, nor wholly know, but their lives replied to hers. They responded in their lives, moved at her words. When she spoke and told them what to do or gave them messages, then they responded, they replied. They felt a Godhead. They felt the divine being in her and obeyed her call. They answered to her lead. Where she was going, they would follow. And they did her work in the world. So there were such sadhaks in the ashram who just used to do whatever mother told them. And she could tell to Uda, for example, that we need a workshop to manufacture all the metal parts for the building of Golconda. But I can't give you any money, she said. She gave him 1 rupee as her blessings. And he just went ahead and organized everything and created that place. So there were such wonderful sadhaks who answered to her lead and did her work in the world. So in the same way, around Savitri, there are such people. You would like to read, sir?
Their lives, their natures moved compelled by us, as if the truth of their own larger selves put on an aspect of divinity to exalt them to a pitch beyond the earth's.
Thank you. So those people who surrendered to him, to her, their lives, even their natures, they felt some change in their being because they were moved, compelled by hers, her nature, which is so full of sweetness and compassion and power. They felt all these things. And it's as if the truth of their own larger selves, this is our small self, but all of us have a larger self. No? So it's as if the truth of their own larger selves put on an aspect of divinity. It begins to be divine in order to lift them up to a pitch beyond their earths. Anybody plays a musical instrument? Anybody plays veena or anything like that? No? Anybody here? You know that if somebody plays a musical instrument, you have to tune it. No? And it may be that you sing with a low voice, but the music needs you to sing with a high voice. You have to tune it to a high pitch. So our body has quite a low pitch. It's connected with the earth. We're tied down by gravity. But they were influenced by her so that they contacted something of their larger selves, their own divinity, and they could perform, they could play or they could sing at a higher pitch than their body, than their earth nature would normally allow them to do. So she lifted them up to this higher pitch. The lady behind, do you like to read, Mom?
They felt a larger future meet the walk. She held their hands, she chose for them the paths. They were moved by her towards great unknown things. Faith drove them under joy to feed themselves her. They lived in her. They saw the world with their eyes.
Thank you. So those people, the ones who surrendered, they felt that as they're walking on their human lives, a larger future, something unexpected is opening up in front of them. And she, Savitri, took their hands, held their hand, chose for them which way they should go in order to progress in that larger future. So they were moved by her towards great unknown things, things that they would never have thought of themselves. She showed them their possibilities to go towards a larger future. They were connected to her by faith. Faith drew them. and the joy to feel that they belong to her. No? The joy to feel themselves hers. So they were the blessed souls who could live in her and see the world with her eyes the way that she sees it. But not all the sadhaks were like that. Some were like that. Yes? So now Sri Aurobindo tells us about another kind of response. Joel, would you read?
Some turned to her against their nature's bent, divided between wonder and revolt, drawn by her charm and mastered by her will, possessed by her striving to possess, impatient subjects, their tied longing hearts, hugging the bonds close of which they most complain, murmured at a yoke they would have wept to lose, the splendid yoke of her beauty and her love.
We'll pause there. So these are some other people. They turned to her, they were attracted to her, but it was against the bent. It was against the natural formation of their nature. So it was difficult for them. They felt some division. The soul was responding, but the nature was resisting. So they are divided. The soul is wandering and loving, and the nature is revolting. It doesn't want to obey. They're drawn, they're attracted by her charm, and they are mastered by her will. If she wants them to do something, they have to do it. She's possessing them, she's taking hold of them, looking after them, but they want to possess her. They want to hold her and that she should do what they want. So they are subjects, she's their queen, she rules them, but they're impatient subjects, they complain. Their hearts are longing for her, tied to her, they cling to her, but at the same time they are complaining. They're complaining at this attraction that this power that she has over them. He says they were hugging those bonds. They wanted to have those ties to the mother, but at the same time they complained. And they murmured at a yoke they would have wept to lose. What is a yoke? You know what is a yoke? When we put the bullock to pull the cart, he has the wooden yoke around his neck so that he's connected to the cart and he can pull it along. Or if he has to plow in the field, he'll have a yoke. So that connection with Savitri is like a kind of yoke. She's possessing them. They have to do what she tells, no? So they are murmuring, oh, I have to do it. I don't want. No? But if they had lost that yoke, they would have wept. Because it's such a splendid yoke, that yoke of her beauty and her love. How could they live without it? But because they are divided in their being, difficult for them. You like to read, Ma'am? Yes.
Others pursued her with life's blind desires, and climbing all of them as their lonely moon, hastened to engross her sweetnesses, mean for all.
We'll pause at the full stop. So this is other ones. They are attracted, but they are attracted in the way you're attracted to another human being. They pursued her with life's blind desires. They want from her what they might want from another human being. And they wanted to have her all to themselves. There were some like that, claiming all of her as their lonely own. They wanted to have her all to themselves. They were jealous of other people. So they were hurrying, they were trying to engross her sweetness. Her sweetness is meant for everybody, but they tried to grab as much as they could of it for themselves. When you engross something, it means actually you take over something that doesn't belong to you. So they wanted to have it all for themselves.
As air claims light for its own separate need, demanding her for their own jealous clasp. They asked from her movements bounded like their own, and to their smallness crave their like response.
So those are these people. Sri Aurobindo says, the earth claims all the light of the sun for itself. No? So in the same way, they asked from her movements bounded like their own. They wanted her to behave to them like a human being, in the same small way that they do. No? And they presented her with their own smallness. I want you, mother, I need you. And they was expecting a similar kind of response, that she would say, yes, my child, I love you best of all. But she couldn't say that. So now would you like to read? Yes?
Or they repined that she suppressed their grief and hoped to bind her close with longing's cords.
So when you repine, you are sad, you are sorry, you sulk, you turn your face away, you are not happy, no? They repined because she's just too big for them. She surpassed their grip. They can't hold on to her like that. They wanted to keep her close to them and to tie her up with the cords of their longing, their craving.
Or finding her touch desire too strong to bear, they blamed her for a tyranny they loved, shrank into themselves as from too bright a sun, yet hankered for the splendor they refused.
This is the way human beings go on, no? They desire her touch, but then when they receive something of it, it's too strong for them, no? And then they complain. They blamed her for a tyranny they loved. A tyrant is somebody who doesn't allow you any free will, no? So they blame her, they complain, but at the same time they love her. And shrank into themselves as from too bright a sun. In the middle of the summer, when the sun is too hot and too strong, well, we love the sun, but it becomes too much, no? Then we want to go into the shade. So they shrank back into their little selves to hide from that great sun of her presence. And yet at the same time, they hanker. Hankering means, oh, I wish I could have it. I wish I could have it. I need it. I wish I can have it. They are hankering for that splendor, all that light and power and glory. At the same time, they're refusing it. It's too much for me. I can't bear it. So there's contradictions in people. Read, sir.
Angrily enamored of their sweet, passionate way, the weakness of their earth could hardly bear. They longed but cried out at the touch of desire, inapt to meet divinity so close, intolerant of a force they could not house.
So they're enamored, they're in love with that sweet, passionate ray of light that Savitri is, but they're angrily enamored. They are not happy about being in love with her, because the weakness of their earth, of their physical nature, could hardly bear that light. no? So they are longing for it, but they're crying out, they're complaining, oh, it's too much for me, at that touch, which at the same time they're desiring. It's because they are inapt. They are not fit yet. Their natures are not fit to meet divinity so close. At a distance, now it's easier for us, no? We can look at the pictures and we can receive her love and all that. We don't have to live under Mother's eye every day. Those people who were very close to her, it was not so easy. They had to be fit for that. Only a very few people, like Champaklalji, he could live with Mother and Sri Aurobindo every day. But not everybody could do that. So they are not fit to meet divinity so close. And they are intolerant. They can't bear that force, which they can't house, they can't assimilate it, they can't accept it into themselves. They couldn't become vessels of the Mother's power and love. Would you like to read?
Some drawn unwillingly by her divine sway, endued it like a sweet but alien spell, unable to mount to levels too sublime, they yearn to draw her down to their own earth.
So there are some who are attracted unwillingly to her divine sway. This means her rule. The king holds sway over his kingdom. So she's ruling as a divine being over them, no? So they are drawn, they are attracted by that, but they are attracted unwillingly. Something in them resists. And they are not able to rise up to the sublime levels, those divine levels where she's living. So they want to pull her down. They try to draw her down to the level of their own earth. Sri Aurobindo once complained about that to some of his disciples, that we come down as near as we can to you. We can't come any lower. You have to rise up to us. Suresh?
Her first to center round the positive
Lives
were hoped to bind to the heart's human needs. The glory and grace that had enslaved the soul.
So they can't help, they feel forced to make her the center of their lives, of all their passions and feelings. But they're trying, what they're hoping to do is to bind to their own human needs, what their own heart wants. They want to tie her glory and her grace, because her glory and grace has enslaved their souls. The souls are attracted, but the natures are having difficulty. No? But the souls have been enslaved. The Mother's power, her divinity, her beauty, her love has made their souls her slaves. They have to obey her. Patricia?
But mid this world, these hearts that answered her call, none could stand up her equal and her mate.
Yes. So in this world, in this material world, all these hearts that are answered her call, that are attracted to her, that move around her, none of them could stand up as her equal and her mate. None of them can be her partner and companion. Do you like to read?
In vain thus stooped to equal them with her high traits, to pure that air was for small souls to breathe.
To breathe. Yes, good. Yeah. In vain. So she stooped, she bent down to make them, to meet them on the same level. No? But just that air which is around was too pure for their small souls to breathe. They couldn't come up to her height. You want to read? No. You like to read, huh?
Yes. Discovery serves to rise to her own wide way, the heart dissolve and fill with her own power, that the divine force might enter like a breath of Godhead, greater humankind.
Good. Yes. So these people who are around her, they are like parts of herself, comrade selves. Your comrades are your friends, no? The people who are close to you. So these people who are around her, all the people who live in the palace, all the people that she meets, she wants to raise them up to her own wide breadth. She wants to make them as wide as she is. That's what her heart desires. She wants to fill them all with her own power so that a diviner force can enter human life, so that a breath of Godhead greaten human time, make human time something greater and nobler. That's why she's come to earth, to implant something of her divine nature here so that it can grow here like a plant of earth. That's what her heart desires. Nargis?
Although she leaned down to their littleness, covering their lives with her strong, passionate hands, and knew by sympathy their needs and wants, and dived in the shallow wave depths of their lives, and met and shared their heartbeats of grief and joy, and bent to heal their sorrow and their pride, lavishing the might that was hers on her lone peak, to lift to their aspirations proud. And though she drew their souls into her vast, and surrounded with the silence of her deeps, and held at the great mother hold her own, only her earthly surface bore their charge, and mixed to its fire with their mortality.
One more
A
line.
greater self-lived soul unclaimed within.
Yes. So that's a long sentence, isn't it? Let's look at it line by line. She, Savitri, leaned down to the littleness of all those people around her, and she covered their lives with her strong hands. She's looking after them. She's protecting them. And by sympathy, she can feel what they need and what they want. And even, he says, she dived. It's like she swims in the shallow wave depths of their lives. Their lives like a sea or a pool. And she goes. For her, it's very shallow, the paddling pool. She can go in at the 15 meters depth. But she goes with them in the shallow wave depths of their lives. She can enter into what they want and they need. She meets and shares their heartbeats, what's making their hearts beat, with grief, they are unhappy about certain things, and joy. And she bent down to heal their sorrow when they're unhappy. She wants to soothe away that unhappiness. And their pride. Our pride makes us unhappy. No? I think, oh, I'm a very important person and nobody realizes how important I am. But she tried to soothe them, no, their pride. She lavishes, she gives generously that power which belongs to her on her lone peak, that high mountaintop of consciousness where her being really lives. She pours out generously all her power to try and lift up to her level the cry, their cry of aspiration. And she's drawing their souls into her vastness and surrounds it with the silence of her deeds. She can give peace, she can give calm. And she holds them as the Great Mother holds her own, because she is an emanation of the Great Mother. And the Great Mother is the mother of all of us and embraces all of us. So Savitri was like that for the people around her. No? She's doing all that for them. Only her surface, the earthly surface, this human part of her, is taking care of these people, mixing its fire with their mortality. They are ordinary human beings. She puts some of her fire into them. Her greater self lived, soul alone, unclaimed. Nobody can claim it as their own. She is living within. That's what we are told. We should try to live within, in our souls. She was always doing that. But her outer nature was taking care of all these people around her. We'll read a little more. Anybody on the back line would like to read?
After her in dumb nature strayed and pain, their nearness she could tell
Serenely. Yeah.
The force in her raw yet subhuman laws, and to her spirit's large and free delight, she joined the ardent,
Hued.
magnificent limbs of animal and bird and flower and tree.
So more often she got a response in nature. Human beings are so limited. Oftener in the stir, the movement, and the peace of dumb nature, the nature that doesn't speak, no? She could feel a nearness to herself. She could feel a oneness, because in nature, in dumb nature, there's something serene and peaceful. Serene, it's such a lovely word. And that force, that divine force in her, attracts Earth's subhuman broods, all the beings who are not human. We think they are inferior to us, but they are the animals, the birds, the flowers, and the trees. She could join their ardent-hued, magnificent lives. They have such wonderful colors, no? And there's something glorious about the lives of the animals and the birds and the flowers and the trees. She joins all that to the large, free delight of her own spirit. And those beings, they responded to her with the simple heart. No? So the flowers, the animals, the birds, the trees, they communicated, we know, with our mother. What a wonderful contact she had with them. It's the same with Savitri. Her will was puissant on their nature's acts. Her heart's inexhaustible sweetness lured their hearts. A being they loved, whose bounds exceeded theirs. Her measure they could not reach, but bore her touch, answering with the flowers' answer to the sun. They gave themselves to her and asked no more. One greater than themselves, too wide for their ken, their minds could not understand, nor wholly know. Their lives replied to hers, moved at her words. They felt a Godhead and obeyed a call, answered to her lead, and did her work in the world. Their lives, their natures, moved, compelled by hers, as if the truth of their own larger selves put on an aspect of divinity to exalt them to a pitch beyond their earths. They felt a larger future meet their walk. She held their hands, she chose for them their paths. They were moved by her towards great unknown things. Faith drew them, and the joy to feel themselves hers. They lived in her, they saw the world with her eyes. Some turned to her against their nature's bent, divided between wonder and revolt, drawn by her charm and mastered by her will, possessed by her, her striving to possess, impatient subjects, their tied, longing hearts, hugging the bonds close of which they most complained, murmured at a yoke they would have wept to lose, the splendid yoke of her beauty and her love. Others pursued her with life's blind desires, and claiming all of her as their lonely own, hastened to engross her sweetness meant for all. As earth claims light for its lone separate need, demanding her for their sole jealous clasp, they asked from her movements bounded like their own, and to their smallness craved a like response. Or they repined that she surpassed their grip, and hoped to bind her close with longing's cords. Or finding her touch desired too strong to bear, they blamed her for a tyranny they loved, shrank into themselves as from too bright a sun, yet hankered for the splendor they refused. Angrily enamored of her sweet, passionate ray, the weakness of their earth could hardly bear. They longed, but cried out at the touch desired, inapt to meet divinity so close, intolerant of a force they could not house. Some, drawn unwillingly by her divine sway, endured it like a sweet but alien spell. Unable to mount to levels too sublime, they yearned to draw her down to their own earth, or forced to center round her their passionate lives. They hoped to bind to their hearts' human needs her glory and grace that had enslaved their souls. But mid this world, these hearts that answered her call, none could stand up her equal and her mate. In vain she stooped to equal them with her heights. Too pure that air was for small souls to breathe. These comrade selves, to raise to her own wide breadths her heart desired, and fill with her own power, that a diviner force might enter life, a breath of Godhead greaten human time. Although she leaned down to their littleness, covering their lives with her strong, passionate hands, and knew by sympathy their needs and wants, and dived in the shallow wave depths of their lives, and met and shared their heartbeats of grief and joy, and bent to heal their sorrow and their pride, lavishing the might that was hers on her lone peak, to lift to it their aspirations' cry. And though she drew their souls into her vast, and surrounded with the silence of her deeps, and held as the great mother holds her own, only her earthly surface bore their charge, and mixed its fire with their mortality. Her greater self lived soul unclaimed within. Oftener in dumb nature's stir and peace, a nearness she could feel serenely won. The force in her drew earth's subhuman broods, and to her spirit's large and free delight she joined the ardent-hued, magnificent lives of animal and bird and flower and tree. They answered to her with the simple heart,